I stood there, heart thumping against my ribs, as the warmth of the kitchen light spilled out into the dusk, fogging up the glass window like a breath against the cold. I should have turned away. I should have walked back to my apartment and pretended I hadn't seen anything. But there she was, my neighbor, the woman who lived just a few doors down, oblivious to the chill that crept into the evening air, and yet somehow so inviting, so warm. I was Daniel Lowry, 24, a junior graphic designer at a firm that had just enough prestige to make my parents proud without really filling me with any sense of purpose. Lately, I'd been feeling adrift, as if the world outside my window was a movie I was only half watching. And there she was, in her kitchen, the star of a scene I couldn't look away from. She leaned over the counter, chopping vegetables with an almost rhythmic precision. Her loose shirt hung off one shoulder, revealing a hint of pale skin. I felt an electric jolt run through me, something forbidden and thrilling. The way she moved was deliberate, each cut punctuated by the soft thud of the knife against the board, creating a kind of music that drew me closer even as I knew I shouldn't. Then, just as I thought I might step back, she turned her head slightly, catching the reflection of me in the glass. For a moment, I felt exposed, caught in a web of my own making. But she didn't flinch or gasp. Instead, she smiled, a subtle lift at the corner of her mouth that beckoned me in. "Come in if you're already watching," she said, her voice floating through the foggy barrier between us, unafraid and inviting. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I hesitated, guilt tugging at me, but curiosity overpowered it. I'd seen her before. She was my neighbor, an older woman in her late 30s, a mother of two, and I was just the guy who lived next door, always polite, always careful to keep my distance. But tonight, everything felt different. I stepped away from the window, almost in a daze, heart racing as I walked to her door. The path leading to her home was lined with small, manicured hedges, a stark contrast to my own wild garden that I tended to neglect. I knocked softly, half expecting her to dismiss me, to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Instead, she opened the door, her hair slightly tousled, a curious glint in her eye. "Daniel," she said, voice warm as she stepped aside to let me in. "I didn't think you'd actually come." I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but inside, I was a bundle of nerves. "I didn't want to be rude," I replied, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. She gestured for me to take a seat at her kitchen table, which was cluttered with an array of spices and half-prepped ingredients. The air was rich with the scent of garlic and herbs, an intoxicating mix that wrapped around me like a warm blanket. "I was just making dinner," she said, her casual tone brushing aside the tension that filled the space between us. "Would you like some?" It felt oddly intimate, sitting there in her kitchen, the light casting soft shadows across her face. "Sure," I replied, not sure if I was hungry for food or for something else entirely. As she moved to the stove, I found myself watching her again, the way her body moved, the way she focused on the task at hand, as if there were no other distractions. I was drawn in, hanging on to every moment, as if I could memorize the way she carried herself. "So, what's been going on with you?" she asked, her back turned to me, stirring a pot. "Just work, I guess," I replied, feeling the weight of my mundane life. "Trying to keep busy." She turned, leaning against the counter, arms crossed, her gaze steady. "You can't just keep busy to avoid feeling," she said, her voice cutting through the air with an unexpected sharpness. "What are you really avoiding, Daniel?" I swallowed hard, caught off guard by her perceptiveness. "I'm not avoiding anything," I lied, though even I could hear the dishonesty in my tone. "Really?" she challenged, and for a moment, the atmosphere shifted. It was as if the kitchen had closed in around us, the warm light suddenly feeling stifling. "Because it seems like you're stuck in a loop. You come home, you sit, you watch, but you never engage." I felt exposed, her words hitting closer to the truth than I wanted to admit. Maybe I'm just observing, I said, attempting to deflect the weight of her inquiry. She raised an eyebrow, and the corner of her mouth curved again in that playful, knowing smile. Observing or watching? There's a difference, you know? I held her gaze, that teasing spark igniting something within me, something I hadn't expected. There was a daring challenge in her eyes, an invitation that seemed to promise more than just conversation. Maybe you should observe me more closely, she said, the words laced with a hint of mischief. See what you're missing. The tension in the room thickened, an electric hum that resonated between us. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, an acute awareness of the space separating us. I wanted to bridge that gap, to close the distance that felt almost unbearable, but fear held me back. Why do you care? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why do you want to know about me? She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. Because I see you, Daniel, and I think you're more than what you show the world. You're hiding behind your work, behind that window. Her words wrapped around me like a vine, squeezing tight as I grappled with the truth they contained. I wanted to protest, to push back against the vulnerability she was exposing, but something inside me craved her understanding, her acceptance. Maybe I like it that way, I murmured, half truth and half excuse. She chuckled softly, her laughter a gentle balm against my defenses. You think being an observer is safer? It can be lonely, you know? Her gaze held mine, the silence stretching between us, thick and charged. I could feel the weight of her words, the gravity of the moment pulling me in. Was I ready to admit that I craved more than just the view from my window? Before I could respond, the sound of children's laughter broke the tension, echoing from the backyard. My heart sank at the reminder of her reality. Her life filled with family, with obligations and routines. I was just a neighbor, an intruder in her world. Your kids? I said, breaking the spell. Are they home? She sighed, a hint of longing crossing her features. They'll be in soon. But for now, it's just us. Just us. The phrase lingered in the air, heavy with possibility. I glanced at the clock on the wall, its ticking a reminder of time slipping away. Maybe I should go, I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I didn't want to leave, didn't want this moment to end. Why? She asked, her eyes narrowing slightly, a playful challenge lingering in her tone. Are you afraid of what might happen next? I hesitated, caught in the web of her words. Was I afraid? Or was I simply unsure? I wanted to step closer, to reach out and touch the warmth that radiated from her, to dissolve the distance that felt so insurmountable. I don't know, I finally admitted, my voice barely a whisper. Maybe I am. She took a step closer, the warmth of her body radiating toward me. You don't have to be afraid, she said softly, her gaze unwavering. I'm not going to hurt you. But there was a fear lurking in the shadows of my mind, a fear of crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. I was drawn to her, to the chemistry that crackled in the air, but the realities of our lives loomed like an impenetrable wall. What if someone sees us? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Then they'll see two neighbors sharing a moment, she replied, her voice steady and reassuring. It doesn't have to mean anything more. But what if it does? She paused, the silence stretching between us, thick with unspoken words. Then we'll figure it out, Daniel. Together. The air felt charged with electricity, the distance between us shrinking as I dared to take a step closer. I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, but there was something else too, an undeniable spark that drew us together. In that moment, everything shifted. The fear, the hesitation, the walls I had built around myself began to crumble. I was tired of watching from the sidelines, tired of feeling like a ghost in my own life. Maybe I don't want to just observe anymore, I said, my voice a raw whisper. Her lips parted, surprise flickering across her face before she stepped even closer, almost close enough to touch. "Then what do you want?" I could feel the heat radiating between us, and in that moment the kitchen felt small, the world outside fading away. "I want to know you. All of you." Her breath caught in her throat, and for a heartbeat, the air between us pulsed with possibility. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the tug of her responsibilities warring against the undeniable chemistry that crackled in the air. But before anything could solidify, the sound of a door slamming echoed from the backyard, the laughter of her children spilling into the kitchen like a cold splash of reality. The moment shattered, and I stepped back, heart racing, breath hitching in my throat. "Your kids," I said, suddenly awkward, feeling like I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "Right?" she said, her voice tinged with a mix of regret and something else. Longing, perhaps. "They'll be inside any minute." I glanced at the clock again, my mind racing. I should leave, should retreat to the safety of my own apartment. But the urge to linger, to stay just a little longer, pulled at me. "I should go," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Daniel." I turned to face her, uncertainty swirling in my chest. "I didn't mean to intrude. It's not an intrusion if you want to be here," she said softly, her eyes searching mine. "You can come back anytime." The promise hung in the air, a fragile thread that could easily unravel. "Will you?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could think better of it. "Of course," she replied, her tone sincere. "I'd like that." I nodded, feeling the weight of unspoken words lingering between us. It wasn't a resolution, but it was something. A new understanding, a fragile connection that felt like it could either blossom or shatter. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, the warmth of her kitchen still clinging to me, I glanced back one last time. She stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the golden light, a picture of longing and possibility. And as I turned to walk away, the weight of 1,000 unspoken words hung in the air, promising that this was only the beginning of something new, something undefined, something that would take time to unravel. The night felt alive, electric with anticipation, and as I walked back to my own apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer just a spectator in my own life. I had stepped into her world, and for the first time, I felt the thrill of something real.